Two things need to be present on every page of your novel, besides like words and I guess like a page number. On every page of your novel, your viewpoint character should have a question that they are trying to get an answer to. And perhaps most important of all, the reader should be asking the same question that the character is asking. This is an absolutely critical thing that you need to do in order to keep a reader engaged throughout your entire story. This is something that someone pointed out to me at writing group last week, and it was kind of an aha moment on my part. It's one of those things that you know, but until somebody articulates it, it doesn't really enter into your understanding. After getting that feedback, it has now entered into my understanding, and with this video, I'm hoping to make it enter into your understanding. There are two parts to this idea. First is questions. Second is reader connection and alignment with those questions. I'm going to go through both of these elements today and talk about how you can craft them into your story. Beginning with questions. Questions are great because questions create curiosity, and curiosity makes things interesting. Questions give your characters stuff to do, and when characters do stuff, well, you've got yourself a plot. Your characters should have lots of questions about everything that's happening in the story. Things that create curiosity in them and drive them to take action in order to get answers. Questions might be things like, who murdered the downstairs butler? How does the magic crystal amulet work? How can I defeat the evil villain? Where is the Fountain of Youth? Where is the magic crystal amulet that the evil villain used to murder the downstairs butler? Questions might arise out of a character's inner self-doubt or insecurities as well. Things like, am I capable of doing this thing? Am I good enough for my love interest to love me back? Can I overcome my fear? Perhaps the best kinds of questions are choices. In this case, the question itself revolves around what course of action the character should take. You see this in things like love triangles, where they have two different love interests. You see this in situations where, like, there's a bus full of puppies and a bus full of kittens, both dangling off a cliff, and the hero can only save one of them. You also see these sort of choice questions in moral or ethical dilemmas that your characters face. For instance, if you have a normally law-abiding character who needs to break the law in order to do what's morally right, just based on the situation, that gives them a choice to either live within their values or do what, in this circumstance at least, is the right thing to do. At the end of the day, the impossible choices that you present your characters with ultimately boil down to questions that those characters must answer. We want stories that stretch our characters, that pushes them into new and unfamiliar and ideally dangerous territory. These kinds of experiences often result in plenty of questions because they are novel experiences, and if the character knew everything about the situation that they were encountering, then they would be somewhere familiar, and familiarity from a storytelling perspective is just kind of meh. Now let's talk about the other part of the equation, which arguably is the more important part of the equation, and that is making sure your reader is asking the same questions as the character. Let's start off with why the reader needs to be asking the same questions as the character. As I mentioned, these questions are what drive the plot of the story. They're what spur the character into action, and we want readers invested and interested in the plot. And they will be interested in the plot if they are interested in getting answers to the same questions that the characters are interested in getting answers to. This also factors into character likability, the connection between the reader and a character, and also reader trust of that character. If the character has answers that the reader doesn't have, it might feel like they are withholding information. The reader is going to feel a few steps behind the character, and that will create some distance between them. They won't feel like they're on the same page. If your detective character figures out steps 1 through 5 of the murder mystery, but the reader is still not sure about step 1, or you didn't communicate what step 1 was, then you've got a problem. The reader will feel left behind. They will have different questions than the character, and the character will proceed to move through the story answering different questions than the reader has. This is not what you want. The reader will feel like the story is disjointed or confusing. They won't be able to connect with it because it'll be going off in directions that they don't want it to go off in because they want different information than what the story is providing. So how do you figure this out? What can you do to make sure that you are posing the same questions that the reader is posing? I think the only way to figure this out for sure is to have other people read your work. I know that's kind of a crummy answer, but you're not going to know what questions a reader will have until you encounter a reader, until you have somebody actually read the work. And even then, different folks will have different questions or will pick up on different things. So predicting the questions that every single reader is going to have is quite difficult to do. This is where a good critique partner, beta reader, maybe an editor can help you tease some of these things out. That's why getting feedback from a group of people or several different people, if you can, is always helpful. Beyond getting feedback on your writing, though, I think there are a few things that you can do to make this whole problem a little bit easier. First is make sure that you have questions that your character is asking in the first place. This is not necessarily literal questions that they're asking, but rather information that they want to or need to discover. If your characters don't have questions, if they don't have things that they're seeking out, then your story is probably lacking a bit in plot, and if the character doesn't have any questions, then the reader definitely isn't going to have any questions. Unless their question is, why doesn't the character have any questions they want answered? Then the reader will have that question, but that's not a good question for them to have. Next thing is to be careful with what characters you make viewpoint characters in your novel. It is really hard to hide information from the reader when the viewpoint character has that information. Like, it's easy to hide the information, but it's hard to pull it off. It's hard to make it work sometimes. It can be done, but it's tricky. If you have a character with a secret, they most often shouldn't be the viewpoint character, or else make sure that the secret isn't a major focal point when they are the viewpoint character. Watsonian characters can be helpful in this area as well. These are characters who are new to a setting or just generally unfamiliar with the world that you've put them into and what's going on in it. Apprentices, people who just got traded to the team, normal IQ people surrounded by geniuses. Any sort of character that has an excuse to have things explained to them will help you resolve questions in the reader's mind and also set the right questions that the reader wants to have answers to. Watsonian characters are beneficial because they both have an excuse to be seeking out a lot of answers, and they generate a lot of questions because of this. They often mirror the reader because just like the reader, these Watsonian characters are new to the stuff that's happening in your story, so their experience is very similar to what the reader is going through. They are likely to naturally have a lot of the same questions that the reader has. I would also add that in general, you need to hint at things and answers a little bit stronger than you may think you need to in order for readers to pick up on certain things. Make the answers a touch more obvious than you might feel is necessary. It is really easy to forget how familiar you are with the story, and also forget that a reader is not familiar with your story. This means that when you read through, it will seem like stuff is a little bit more on the nose, a little bit too obvious, but for somebody who's coming fresh to the story, who doesn't know anything about the story, that might be just enough information for them to pick up on the sort of questions and answers that you're laying out. Obviously, you can go too far with this and make things too obvious and bash readers over the head with information. So there is a balance here. But I would say in general, because you are familiar with your story, you want to lean more towards being what you feel is a little bit too obvious. Speaking of obvious things, this is obviously the end of the video because it's the end of the video. Does anybody have any questions? So there you have it. I would love to hear what you think about this video in the comments down below. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I will see you next time.